Hi, everyone. I'm John Calvert from the Department of Surgery at Emory University. This year, I served as the chair of the BCVS Outstanding Early Career Investigator Award Committee. I would like to first take this opportunity to congratulate the three finalists. They all gave outstanding presentations. It was some really good work. And if you did not have a chance to tune into the session, I would encourage you to go online and watch the talks. The committee had a very tough time, and we deliberated for a long time on the three finalists, and it was a very close race. And in the end, Emmanouil Tampakakis, who's an assistant professor in the Division of Cardiology at Johns Hopkins, emerged as the winner. His talk was entitled Sympathetic Innervation Negatively Regulates Postnatal Cardiomyocyte Proliferation Through Circadian Genes. It is now my pleasure to speak with Emmanouil about his work. First, congratulations. It is a very good story. I guess if you could just tell us a little bit about the project and sort of how it came about.
Yes, of course. So thank you again very much for having me today here. It was an honor for me to present and compete with two great speakers. All the talks are very excited. I was actually almost certain that the first talk is going to win this. I really enjoyed his talk. So yeah, this whole thing started pretty much by my intellectual curiosity years ago when we are actually at the time working on maturing stem cell derived cardiomyocytes by culturing them with sympathetic neurons deriving from human stem cells. We did get some very interesting data back then. We found that at least cardiomyocytes do promote a more mature phenotype on the neurons, and that the neurons have an effect on stem cell derived cardiomyocytes as well. And I was very curious to see what will be the effect on the neonatal cardiomyocytes. I looked in the literature and I found that there was pretty much like nothing since the 80s or early 90s on this, when we didn't have enough tools to actually study what is the role of innervation in neonatal cardiomyocytes. And this is important because, you know, there's the premature born babies that have incomplete innervation. There's lots of surgeries that happens to, you know, babies when they're born with congenital heart disease that interrupt, you know, innervation. Also, pregnant women do take beta blockers during the pregnancy or immediately after, which can also interfere with, you know, neurotransmitters in the heart. So there's some very interesting, you know, questions that you can actually answer from this. And to me, the most important thing is actually what happens later on, you know, at adult stages, or how the neonatal cardiomyocytes mature if you actually affect, you know, their innervation. That was, again, what drove me into this. So by looking at the literature, I found that we didn't have really good tools. There was a time that the paper came out from Mukuyama's lab talking about NGF mediating the innervation of the heart. So I decided to work on NGF and find actually a tool that will profoundly inhibit the innervation, not just minimally. I didn't want to use, you know, chemical reagents to actually affect this. I wanted to do it in a more natural way. So I got several, you know, mice from like collaborators, and I experiment quite a bit with this, using different Cree drivers to do this. I use MESP1, I use WT1, I use different, you know, Cree models. And the one that I thought, at least after a year of experimenting with this, worked the best was this SM22 alpha Cree that we use, which was a little bit more heart or cardiovascular specific, I felt at the time, and did give me the most robust phenotype and the most reproducible data. And I decided to, you know, play more with this. And, you know, when we're analyzing first, you know, RNA-seq data to actually understand what, you know, was happening, we saw, interestingly, that some circadian genes were affected in the heart. And again, the phenotype that we're seeing on this is like the mice had slightly larger hearts. And even though the size of the cardiomyocytes was smaller, the number appears to be higher, which explained, you know, why the heart size was a little bit bigger as well. So we thought there was likely more proliferation. And the RNA-seq data supported the fact that there were more cycle genes. And then again, circadian genes came up. And at the time, I didn't even know that, you know, the heart has its own, like, you know, circadian genes that can play a role into anything, actually. And there were not that many people around the world that studied this. It's pretty much 2 or 3 investigators, to be honest with you. So when back in the literature, I looked and see what was out there. There wasn't really much, at least, about the neonatal, you know, role of circadian genes, and especially the 2 ones, the period 1 and period 2, that I found that I thought they might be mediating some of that effect. And I decided to think outside of the box and say, like, you know, let's see what else is out there about circadian genes. I read a lot about this, and I found that there's a whole group of cardio-oncology right now, like there are cancer therapeutics where they actually give chemotherapy at specific times in the day, thinking that, you know, cancer cells are actually more vulnerable and are proliferating less. And specifically period 1 and period 2 upregulation is supposed to like decrease proliferation of cells, at least in cancer, highly proliferative cells. So to me, it was very intriguing because, again, any experiments I did, I found that period 1 and period 2 were downregulated in my mice. So I decided to get the double knockout mice from a collaborator. She did have already mice going. I started experimenting with them, and I saw that I can recapitulate part of my phenotype, and at least the one where you see more proliferation, postnatally. And then again, I went back to see specifically what, how this might be mediated, based my whole thing on like previously published, literature from other investigators studying circadian genes, either in the liver or other organs, and found that they can be mediating this through WEE1, a kinase that might be affecting the phosphorylation of CDK1 and entry into mitosis, actually. So this whole thing, like, tied up well together. I don't think that circadian genes is the whole story, obviously, of this. I mean, there's more role and more things that, neurons are doing in neonatal cardiomyocytes. And there's so many more things that, need to be discovered. For example, there is an effect on, they mediate some recruitment on, leukocyte or inflammatory cells in the heart postnatally. And I'm seeing this in my RNA-seq there. I'm very curious to study this. I want to see whether they play a role in like heart regeneration later on. What specifically is the role in like the maturation and other structural and calcium handling genes? Because I'm seeing there is an effect there. There's a lot of heterogeneity in the heart because, again, the innervation of the heart is epicardial to endocardial. There is a gradient as well. So there's a different, effect on, the neurons and different populations of cardiomyocytes. So I'm really planning to do single-cell RNA-seq and attack this further and see what is specifically an effect on neurons on different populations of cardiomyocytes, which I think there is going to be some variability. So, again, it can generate, lots of questions that, definitely worth, tackling in the future. And I'm really excited to, continue working on this.
How do you think it's going to like sort of translate into the clinic? Like for, as you mentioned, the mothers who take the beta blockers during pregnancy, like, do you think that these children are going to have cardiac defects or just potential cardiac defects, and how can this be sort of treated?
Yeah, so I mean, there is already a paper by Bernard Kuhn from University of Pittsburgh that, what he did is pretty much show that, if you use beta-1, beta-2 double knockout, mice, the heart ends up with a higher number of cardiomyocytes that are also more mononuclear as well. So there's definitely an effect on beta receptors. And based on his paper, that was important for at least children with hypoplastic left hearts. So, there might be an effect there for sure. Again, we know, for example, that, again, prematurely born, babies, they do have greater heart rate variability from incomplete innervation, and that based at least on cardiac MRI study, there appears to be some sort of, change in geometry, like increased thickness of the heart based on the MRI, and potentially some association with like future disease that we still do not know. Again, also the effect on, inflammatory cells, and whether, like, for example, if you take those hearts later on and, either do TAC or do MIs or, other ways to like manipulate the heart function, whether, inflammation in the heart or other things might be affected by the lack of innervation. I think there can be lots of, translation potential. Whatever I'm seeing here is, hearts at baseline. It's not really an effect, without disease, right? We haven't stressed the hearts. We haven't really, starved, for example, those mice. We haven't induced any physical or emotional stress on the pups, right? So this is all under normal conditions. So it might be even more important, or the neurons might have an even more important role under specific, stressors or, more stressful conditions in general, or during disease.
So in terms of, I guess, what's sort of your next sort of steps to expand upon this? And
yes, I mean, my next step is to definitely publish the paper. I mean, that's the goal right now. So, I really have to publish this, and, we'll try to aim high. So we'll see how that goes. But, after publishing this, yes, I'm making an R1 proposal with, getting some more preliminary data specifically on the maturation of the heart. So I'm in the process of like, doing single-cell RNA-seq on different stages, of the hearts with different, innervation. And I'm actually making different mice. This time I'm not going to be manipulating specifically NGF expression in the heart, but primarily the pathway or like the receptors of NGF. So it's a cleaner system, if you will. So I'm planning to use those, hearts and specifically tackle the question of what is the effect on different subpopulations of myocytes during maturation, and whether that leads to like future disease after, TAC or after MI, what is the role there, and see whether, again, inflammatory cells might be mediating this. And also, I'm thinking of, they're actually available, some period 2 flox mice, so I can make conditional knockouts of period 1 and period 2 in the heart specifically, and potentially test their effect on, heart regeneration, specifically on the circadian genes, on those 2 genes, and on the maturation of, neonatal cardiomyocyte. So that will be my immediate goal on, this specific, project.
I look forward to reading the paper and to seeing where this goes. And
I hope you're one of the reviewers as well.
And so again, I'd like to congratulate you on an outstanding presentation and for being this year's Outstanding Early Career Investigator Award winner.
Again, I would like to thank the committee a lot for this. I mean, this is great news on, very challenging times. So I'm really excited about this. I did have quite a bit of wine last night and tried to spend some time explaining to my 4-year-old son why science is important and why, this award is important for Daddy. And I would like to, also advertise the fact that we're looking for talent in postdoc. So if you really want to enjoy, if you really want to do science, good science, work with us, enjoy the work, feel free to send me an email, contact me. I'm sure, I'm happy to interview or talk to people about this, about my work. Thank you very much again for the invitation and for the support.